So we had different scale models for different shots. It allowed us to make Thunderbird 2, for instance, seem much further away using a small one, and yet not so far away from the camera that it interfered with shadows and things like that. And we did the same with all of the different models. We had various scales, but they were all hung on wires and floated around. Obviously, the smaller ones moved at much slower speed because they're further away, and sometimes you could have one flyby in the foreground and then appear around the back of a mountain as a much smaller model later on in the shot. So that's why we have different scales. To enable us to get forced perspective on tracking shots with models and sky and road, we used to use a rolling road running at one speed with the sky moving at a slightly slower speed and models suspended over the top of the road. So cue the road and cue the sky, boys. So as you can see, the illusion of being underwater is done by holding the model on wires with a set built behind it, a fish tank in front and little fish swimming around in the tank and reflections in the water, which added to the realism. That's how we used to do it with a high-speed camera. By the time we got to Stirling Road, we had a much bigger tank to put in front of the camera, so we could do tracking shots with the camera covered in black velvet so it didn't show up as a reflection. And this tank was manufactured on Slough Trading Estate, and it had really quite thick glass in it. And it was delivered, and we started shooting on it. And when you put water in the tank, you could see the putty bulging out on the edges of the tank as the pressure of the water pushed the glass further towards the metalwork, and unbeknown to anybody, there was a welding spot of metal proud, and the glass over a period of about 3 days got closer and closer to this point, and then one lunchtime, when there was nobody on the stage, the whole thing shattered. And we walked back on the stage and it was absolutely awash with water, and all the Kliegel boxes were full of water, and because of thousands of gallons, hundreds of thousands of gallons, no, hundreds of gallons. And so that had to be all redone, cleaned up. The one disaster we had with the tank. To get the scale that we needed, we couldn't shoot at the 24 or 25 frames a second because that made the action too fast. So we had to slow everything down. We used 3 times or 4 times normal speed, which slowed it down 3 or 4 times and gave it huge scale and allowed you to see the explosions develop and the smoke and everything else. And these were the sort of cameras we used, and Ariflexes. And that enabled us to do the job that we had to do. The whole point that Derek and I had was we had to make it as good as we could possibly get it. That's how we derived pleasure from looking at shots and thinking, wow, that's worked out really well, and no, we could do better on that one. So we were constantly pushing the limits that we felt we were up against and not costing too much money at the same time. Without any doubt, Derek Meddings was the key effects person, the designer of the major Thunderbird 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 models. He was a superb artist. There are lots of his pictures around that he's painted, conceptual sketches. That was his big thing. It was definitely his forte. And I helped with doing the plastic kit parts and stuff like that, making different looking aircraft from varieties of plastic kits. And we used lots of plastic kits to get the scale, the detail that we needed. Injection molded plastic kits give you really good scale. You can move a camera right in on it and it will still resolve. If you've dirted it down and added little bits and pieces, it will still look believable. Whereas if it's handmade out of balsa wood and stuff like that, it looks rubbish. And we would have buried in amongst all this stuff little explosive charges and slightly bigger explosive charges and even bigger explosive charges to make the whole refinery blow up, which would be done with a series of hits one after the other, camera running at high speed, and focus from as close to the camera lens as we could get to the backing to make it all look like reality, whereas in actual fact it's just a small scale model. The sorts of charges we used were mainly gunpowder wrapped with camera tape a number of times. The harder you wrapped the camera tape around the charge, the more forceful the explosion. And so we would use that in conjunction with sort of liquid petroleum jelly to produce the big outbursts of flame, which, because of the petroleum jelly's way it caught fire, there were lots of tiny flames which gave it scale, as opposed to using gas or something, which would just give you a huge one single flame. So if you're ready, boys, we can blow it up.